Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. We have joining us John Moore, his website, thelibertyman.com, and John is a cohort in similar things dealing with space weather, preparedness, etc., and he always has some preparedness issues in our last segments. John, what's the latest news that's going on? You mentioned something pretty shocking just as we were about to go on air.
Well, it is shocking, but if you understand Islam, maybe it won't be quite so shocking. The Sunnis who are conquering and taking over territory in Iraq and controlling territory, they've issued a fatwa that all unmarried women should be turned over for quote-unquote jihad by sex. And that's what they're ordering. And if you fail to do so, your family will be subject to, quote-unquote, the enforcement of the laws of Sharia upon you.
Execution. So what they're doing is just saying, turn over your unmarried females so we can rape them. This is part of our laws. This, by the way, this is an abomination. This is why I tell people, it doesn't matter if it's we call moderate Islam or extreme Islam. Yes, people think that there's different levels, but if you actually read the shuras of the Quran, it's evil. There's just no way around it that Islam is evil. We should not allow one Muslim person into America. I don't care what level of training they have. We should be turning all these people around and pushing them right back out of the country. We should not allow Sharia law in any of our states. They've been pushing in Michigan and elsewhere, like Dearborn, Michigan. They're pushing in Quebec, Canada, where there's a tremendous number in Montreal and nearby districts. I think it's disgusting. And the problem is, as soon as you get more than just a minority of them, you end up with a big problem. And they start acting like mafiosa. And it's just, remember, Islam is only about 14 to 15% religion. Most of it is actually governmental, how to act, how to eat, how to do everything, including handing over your unmarried females. So this is a very abominable organization. People know that more than any other religious group on earth, the highest levels of Islam are high-level Masons that don't even believe the Quran. They're just high-level maniacs that are Satanists that, along with the maniacs that are within the Christian faith or Jewish or whatever, are high-level Satanists. There's more in Muslims, in the Muslim faith, than all of the other organizations put together. That's pretty bad. People need to understand this.
It is.
It's not just the Southern Baptists that are Masons.
ISIS forces, that's ISIS, have decreed that women report for jihad by sex duty. And there's a illustration of a woman sitting on the side of a bed, all with her Islamic garb on, and her legs from the knees down being displayed, while the rest of her is covered up. This is really bizarre. I mean, for a Westerner to look at this, a mature adult in the West to look at this, and I know myself, I think this is right out of the Middle Ages. Right out of the Middle Ages. These people are stuck in 6 centuries ago. Their cultural development, their philosophy, their beliefs are stuck 6 centuries ago in the past.
Well, it's not just stuck in the past, they're stuck in Satanism. What we have to understand is that this is very, very evil, and we need to call it what it is, rather than just stupid or whatever, or ancient. This is evil. And it's not acceptable in the 21st century anywhere on earth. And by the way, as Americans, I know we don't want to be insular, but you know, America has done one of two things wrong. Firstly, when we go into conquer an area, we need to truly conquer it, which means disarm all of the local people of all of their weapons. Number two, what we should have done is annex Israel and clean out the rat's nest of all the Islamic countries around them with all their weapon systems, and control the Israelis so they just don't start a nuclear war. But on the second hand, we shouldn't be tolerating Iran, so-called trying to get nuclear weapons. They're lying to us through their teeth. And we know that the countries like Waziristan, we should have moved in special forces and cleaned out the Waziristani nuke site immediately. That should have been done years ago. I mean, why are we tolerating Islamic countries having nuclear weapons? It's just not reasonable. And the fact is, we've also proven that our missile defense system doesn't work. I knew this from before, but there's an article up on Google News, and it's crazy. They're saying the same stupid things they did in 2010, that they failed a missile defense. They said, yeah, we hit it now because we've got a better missile inertial guidance system. Come on, guys. This is a military industrial intelligence black hole to stuff money and to tell people, yeah, we got a missile defense system. And they don't even tell about the fact that the ultimate missile defense is this interferometry shield over the whole world that America controls. Not just a missile to hit a missile theater air defense. Our defenses are better than they try to say they are, and which is why the Russians are scared to death to attack us, because they know we'll fry them flat in a pancake. But we have weapons that are at level 10. Still doesn't mean that the Islamic maniacs won't release a bioweapon on us, and they don't even have people that we haven't properly monitored. Napolitano already made mention of this numerous times. We couldn't stop a nuke coming through Mexico ports or through Freeport, Bahamas, when we could break the seals in every container coming through and put them through a radiation detector. Anything that goes click, click even twice, they should immediately pull the entire cargo and find out if they're moving a, not suitcase nuke, but a container-sized one. And I think it's just sloppiness. To me, there's no excuse whatsoever for any nuclear material. We fly jets and aircraft over every city every week. We know if there's scintillating material up to 440 meters below ground from space, from aircraft that fly over every city in the Western world, including Canada, the United States, Australia, etc. There's just no excuse for any future nuclear terrorism on American soil. And by the way, I'm going to say this in advance of it. If a nuke bomb goes off in any U.S. city, it is because Homeland Security allowed it, and because our government allowed it, just like they allowed this illegal massive surge of children coming across from Central America. They spread these rumors on purpose so they could flood us with these illegal children, and they're bringing tuberculosis and Lyme disease and other problems, rather than helping the people at their home, helping them have food supplies, helping them have shelters, helping them have, in their own countries like El Salvador, etc. The idea of allowing a massive surge of children to be dropped at our doorstep is insanity.
It is, absolutely.
It's also cruel for the children. They're separated from their parents.
Pretty good. There's an article posted at my friend Paul Martin's website, revolutionradio.org. An interview, the title of the article is Former Federal Agent Reveals Shocking Truth About Russian Attack, EMP Threat, and Coming Martial Law. This is an interview with Michael Maloff, who spent much of his adult life interacting with the federal government in various training capacities and work and so forth. Maloff has written a book about the devastation EMP would cause. I'm looking at the title of the book here in a moment, but it plays right hand in hand with the excellent book 1 Second After, which is probably the premier, there's no problem about the premier novel when it comes to understanding EMP, and a lot of good can be conveyed by a novel. And Maloff's interview here, I think, is very important, and people need to consider getting a copy of his book. And let me see if I can pick up this title here real quick. I just bought my copy, a Kindle edition, earlier today for a little over $7. The title of the book is A Nation Forsaken. Kindle edition, $7.69, hardcover on Amazon, just under $20 delivered. Excellent book, I'm sure, and I look forward to reading it. Yeah, Michael was on the show last year, and we talked about that for several visits. And I agree with him. There's several types of EMP. The first is the fact that the government would do an EMP would be stupid because they'd impair their military more than the civilians. The second is the second source EMP would be you got a fishing boat run by Iranians 200 miles off the coast. Nobody's going to stop them in international waters. They shoot up a missile 120,000 feet in the air and blow up a low-yield EMP-based nuke, and it wipes out a 1,500 radio mile area. It's going to knock out primarily things like satellite communications and ground-based power distribution networks. It won't affect hardly any cars. It might affect some homes and home communications, but it's primarily going to punch out our satellites and our power. And the problem is that if we go to a war with people like Iran, we're going to have that happen. Okay, that's a fact. Absolutely. They've been working for 25 plus years to do it. This is technology that third world countries like Iran could easily possess. A container ship or a fishing vessel, even a Scud missile has enough capability, both altitude and payload, to deliver that type of weapon, let's say halfway between Boston and Washington, D.C. Get it up there a few miles up, and we're looking at an area where 50, 60 million people.
You may have heard about taking silver supplements for better health. And when you're out there without care, I was out of touch. Welcome back, and John, let's touch on some of the other issues here. Kerry talks about the militants posing existential threat to Iraq. I mean, why do they use these obtuse terms? Existential?
I mean, how about the existence of women that are going to be raped? How about the existence of Shiite holy sites that now is going to entice the Iranians to come in with their full army, missile systems and so on to crush them? How about the fact that we are strange bedfellows now with Iran, trying to stop these guys from getting rid of Maliki? And, of course, Obama really doesn't like Maliki because he's Shia, and he would like to see a Sunni government there. Of course, he's backing and been backed by the Saudi Arabians and Qataris. Saudis are evil, B-A-S-T-A-R-D-S. They're evil bastards. And we have a real problem that we know that they're directly tied to the 9/11 disaster. We know they were directly tied with these dancing Israelis and the micronukes put by Israeli special micronuke forces along with the CIA in the World Trade Center towers. And more evidence has come out. I just talked to Mark Gaffney. He's tracked down additional evidence, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but we're working on some inside intelligence there about the Shanksville, Pennsylvania air crash that blew it all over Hell's Half Acre, that aircraft, and what was going on in terms of the activation of a cruise missile that occurred right at the time this plane went down. Obviously, it was hit by something pretty big. So, whenever you see the government getting ready for a drill, like 9/11, when you see them getting drilled for a power drill, you know that you're about to get a blackout. When you see them pretending to say they're going to send in 275 troops to protect our, giant green zone, 5,000 employees in Iraq, one of the largest embassies in the world, inside this cold green zone with this giant wall and compound around it, and we have these crazy ISIS people, why don't we just take care of them? And by the way, we don't just have to bring in troops. We can bring in robot drones, air drones, space-based weapons. We can teach them a damn lesson real quick. And secondly, we got to stop the armaments from flowing in from Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Saudis need to be taught a lesson, too. They need to find out that we're no longer going to play ball with these guys when they do things that put us in more danger. And if they don't behave, we have ways of cutting them off financially and otherwise. Armaments, for example, if we just don't supply the microchips, I found this out from my guys in the Air Force, all their fancy Air Force jets that the Saudis have would have a half-life of between 4 and 11 days before they would be completely non-functional if we didn't even use tech support. So most people don't realize that. All of the air forces that we've been building and supplying and all through the Middle East, if we just don't give them parts, if we don't give them tech support, they're dead in about 11 days.
Absolutely. Well, that's where the money is. Polaroid could have gave away cameras just by and made their money selling the film. Boeing could give away F-15s and make their money on spare parts or technical support. There's so much money in that. I looked up existential during the break here, Doctor. This is so esoteric. I mean, relating to or affirming the existence. That's it. That's for the first step. Grounded in existence or the experience of existence. Why in the world is the Secretary of State using such esoteric language to describe a potential threat? It's beyond me. I mean, he's obviously a bright, well-educated man, but don't we have enough real things, such as unmarried women being forced to be raped as part of the program here, as opposed to getting into esoteric language that hardly anybody can comprehend or understand?
Well, if I was president, I could pick a half a dozen targets or more that are inside the so-called ISIS complex, and I'd fry them into a piece of atomic dust in a matter of minutes. And that would teach them a lesson to back off and to realize that, hey, we're not going to tolerate this, and we don't even need to deploy troops. I mean, really, people don't understand what America has. That's why Russia and these other countries that have half a clue, which the Islamic countries don't. They don't have even the common sense and restraint to realize what we would do to them if we go crazy. And I think it's time for America to start teaching Islam a lesson. And also to teach Israel a lesson. You're not going to go on a half-cocked off and start something. If we're going to do something to these countries and we're going to we'll call defang Iran, we're going to do it properly. And we can do it properly, by the way, with the cooperation of countries like Russia, because Russia wants to make a deal. So does China. We don't have to be at odds with these countries. We can collaborate with them. They want to get all our kids off of drugs. The Russians' kids are just on crocodile, which is really poor quality heroin. It's making them get gangrene. They want to collaborate in getting business into Russia. The fact is the Chinese have now messed with international business so bad their businesses are being pulled from China to go to India, to Kerala, India, and Indonesia and elsewhere. The Chinese are enraged, but guess what? They don't play ball. They're screwed too. The fact is the Chinese can saber rattle all they want. If they try to get really tough, they'll get fried. Just the Japanese alone could just take them out and flatten them as flat as a pancake. And they don't get it over there in China, do they?
No,
they
not
just
at all.
Don't get it.
The Chinese have some issues. They have some cultural, historical issues that are difficult to overcome in just 30 years. I recall a Wall Street Journal article, Doctor, back in the 70s, where the first Chinese citizen bought the first privately owned motor vehicle. And he had to get permission from the local Commissar's Communist Committee and agree to provide transportation to people who didn't have cars in order to. And this was a truck, by the way, a flatbed truck. The first privately owned motor vehicle in the entire country was only 40 years ago. You know, they've come a long way in 40 years, but you've got a cultural heritage and history that is difficult to break through for these folks.
Right. Even the engineers, when they went over there with engineering companies, they wouldn't do any innovative engineering. They were terrified that if they did anything innovative, they would end up being executed if their engineering pilot project went bad. And the international engineers that came over were freaked out and say, "You got to be kidding! These guys would even be innovative even when they're told to be." So no, they don't have the intellectual capacity, the emotional capacity. They're terrified to step out of line. And, the Chinese people are on the verge of revolution. I'd say they're more likely to have a revolution in China than even the Middle East. Chinese people are, for every new job that's available, there's 9 people qualified for those jobs. They're highly educated, they're not stupid, and they're sick and tired of people now getting into their 80s, that are the heads of the Communist Party, flying around their Airstream jets, their children and grandchildren going to the University of Spoiled Children in California. They're going off for shopping expeditions to London during special holidays. It's just disgusting. 80% of the new billionaires are Chinese, and it's only been transnational corporations that created these guys artificially. And now, in the last few years, we've been fighting back and forth with the Chinese. Americans and transnational corps are pulling businesses like crazy from China, and they're freaking out. And their inflation rate's gone through the ceiling. Now they're trying to saber rattle and think, we're going to take on America. Are you nuts? Even without a Navy, we could flatten them so flat without even firing one missile, they have no idea what could happen to them. And that's why when they started stockpiling weapon systems in that giant cavernous facility in western China, we hit them with a space-based geotectonic weapon. Unfortunately, there were 180,000 people that died and 90,000 of them children. People in China just don't get it.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it's a shame, but you know what? We have to understand those things didn't need to happen. We should have just been straight up with them and say, play ball or else. I mean, if we had a strong president, which we don't have, we would have this sorted out with a few conversations and it would be fine.
That's right.
Welcome back, and John, let's talk about some of the more prepper tips. These books you recommend are really strongly recommended the second after.
1 second after.
1 second after, and then the other book, of course, is Michael Malouf's book. He's been on the show last year, and I'd strongly recommend that people should be prepared. We do have, and again, Marshall Masters is a bit of a, how can I say it, on the edge, but he is raising the issue of the approach of the red dwarf star. Now, I don't know if I believe his data about what he thinks is behind the sun or this or that, but I do know that there has been signs of increased temperature and changes on all the planets in the inner solar system. I do know that increased volcanism, methane hydrate surges, and etc., and extreme weather are caused by this approach of this red dwarf star. It is only 4 or 5 degrees below absolute zero, so you can't see it visibly. It has to be with infrared or IRS telescopes, SOHO, or the Chandra X-ray telescope. You can see it with a Pi Meson scope in Antarctica because it's approaching from the southern ecliptic or southern hemisphere. So it's not seen in the northern hemisphere. It's going to be below the ecliptic. So people in the northern hemisphere aren't going to get a view of it. You have to be looking really south.
I'm always getting emails from people in Boise, Idaho, or New York saying they got a photograph of 10th planet. You can get caught up in a lot of rabbit trails when it comes to neighborhood, the 10th planet, Planet X.
Right. Now, the Vatican has the Arecibo telescope, a radio telescope. They have also the Chilean giant super radio telescope and their other visual telescopes, but they're in the southern hemisphere. You're not going to see this except in the southern hemisphere. I got to tell people that, you know. So when you hear people saying
even then, you need the right equipment.
And you need the right equipment, and you also have to have a proper PhD level, astronomer that's going to be able to identify it. Then you need to be able to track it to see, yes, is this an object moving, and is it in the inner solar system, or is it in deep space? So.
Absolutely. Well, let's get back to the prepper tip of the week. We talked about a lot of different things, but people, a lot of our listeners, Doctor, they actually do read books as opposed to the general population, which doesn't read books except for entertainment reading. So these two books, one is a novel, One Second After, which a well-written, well-researched novel, which this is, can have a lot of hard scientific fact in it. And the book One Second After does have hard scientific fact, along with a good summary of human interaction and how humans respond when in this type of crisis. And I think it's a very accurate portrayal of all the different ways in which various human beings will respond in different ways. So that book has a lot of value, One Second After. Mr. Maloff's book, A Nation Forsaken, is not a novel. It gets more into the science and engineering and the reality of this type of event. People need to get these books. They need to read these books, understand and incorporate the knowledge into their daily lives. And then to pay heed, develop a plan, develop a list of priorities for getting you and your family ready to deal with EMP, and then actually do it. Don't just procrastinate, but actually take steps to get your family prepared for an electromagnetic pulse attack.
Yeah, and the other thing is extreme weather. I just got a note from Our Lady Margaret, who's a nurse in Australia. She's in southern Australia, and basically she reports of they call a snowpocalypse or mega blizzard. And this is apparently one of the heaviest snowfalls that's ever been recorded in history in Australia. It's happening right now.
Well, this is the beginning of winter for the Southern Hemisphere. Just the beginning. In fact, the first day of winter for the Southern Hemisphere was Saturday, just like our first day of summer was Saturday, the 21st. So this early in the season, I wouldn't expect that kind of winter. And Australia is not known for having severe winters in the first place.
Well, the latest report from the review, and it's up on Drudge, is that the world's warmest temperature in the 1930s during the basically the Dust Bowl, and that it's been cooling ever since. And they covered up, NOAA and NASA covered up the data. In fact, what's going on now is we're heading into an ice age, a Maunder-type ice age. Dr. Hababil Adamazatov from the Russian Space Agency, Dr. Easterbrook, many other scientists here in America met 4 years ago, this June, 4 years ago, in Chicago, and proved that this year would be the start of the obvious move toward a basically an ice age, a Maunder-type, which is cooling for something around 60 to 70 years, a cooling period for 60 to 70 years, where the mean temperature across America would drop 4 to 7 degrees, where we'd start to see snowpack in the Midwest and northern states that wouldn't go away in the middle of the summer and would destroy crops, where we could have an ice fall literally reestablish itself in some areas in the north, and where a lot of the temperatures that people are used to, and here in Southern California, the temperature will drop maybe 4 to 7 degrees, so we'll still be warm and sunny. But the fact is, we'll actually be rainier, which thank God it would be. But what's happening around the world is it'll mean a collapse in food supply, and in areas where there are arable land, most of places like northern China and Russia will be deep in a deep freeze. I mean, people don't understand just how apocalyptic this is. This is the reason, for example, during the Maunder Ice Ages, why the northern tribes moved down of the Vikings to try to establish lands and take over England and Denmark and these other territories. It was during Maunder-type ice age, which occur every 360 years. These are not infrequent. They happen pretty frequently. Cooling periods for 60 to 70 years every 360 years. It's relatively frequent, and we're heading into one. It's like
we are. Well, in addition to those events, the Gulf Stream stopped, as you and I found out from Dr. Zangari, June 12, 2010, and that's a critical part of everything we're talking about as well. Right. In fact, here, Doctor, in South Central Missouri, where I live, we had the coldest winter since 1912, and right now, in the end of June, beginning of July, we're making preparations right now in South Central Missouri to deal with a winter just as cold, if not colder, for 2014, 2015. So yes, these winters will be getting longer and colder, more severe than they have since the 1930s.
And the other thing that's happening, too, is the ozone layer is getting thinner. So during the time when crops are growing, we're going to have crop failures caused by increased ultraviolet light shock. And I worked with a botanist 40 years ago who developed the theory and proved that, in fact, ultraviolet light can be toxic to crops. And a 70% drop for 45 minutes is enough to knock out a wheat crop or corn crop. So people don't understand this, that we're heading to what I call a toxic shock caused by primarily the deployment in our upper atmosphere of geoengineering nanoparticles of thorium, barium, aluminum, and these nanoparticles of strontium are used as paramagnetic to steer weather storm cells to trigger off geotectonic events and to literally weaponize the atmosphere.
Absolutely. I've got an example of that right outside my window. We have a spring-fed Olympic-sized swimming pool right outside my window here. This is our 10th summer being here. This is the first summer there hasn't been all kinds of growth inside the swimming pool. We clean it out about this time of year, growing up spontaneously. The ultraviolet and whatever else is going on is so strong that the pool is relatively clean and nothing's growing in it before we flush it out and really clean it thoroughly. First time in 10 years we've seen this.
Yeah, well, I know I have a pool, and I don't go to my pool until 3:30 at least, because if I go earlier, I'm going to get a significant burn, and I've never, when I was younger, I just hardly ever burned. I mean, so, you don't go at midday sun unless you want to damage your eyes and damage your skin and get a sunburn or to suppress your immune system. And by the way, if you're taking any specific drugs that are photoactivated, they're photoactivated by ultraviolet light. So many different medical drugs that people take, things like Levaquin and many heart or other antipsychotic drugs or antidepressants, when they pass through your skin, they get photoactivated, become toxic and dangerous to your body in other ways because they get turned into free radicals by the photoactivation from the ultraviolet light.
Would the package information that comes with the drug, would that have that information?
No, they're not going to tell you that unless you check with researchers. If you go and check other sources like that deal with drugs that are photoactivated, you can find a whole list. So check out photoactivated drugs and Google it and you'll find out, wow, it's a long list. Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and you can search down that rabbit trail with things like photochromism and photoactivated medical prescription drugs, so you can just do a search on that and find out that issue. The other thing in Google News, of course, is that international anger on Egypt's sentencing of Al Jazeera. Australian journalist Peter Gress was jailed for 7 years for defaming Egypt, apparently. One thing about Egypt is they're trying to get a dialogue between the different groups, including Christian Maronites and so on, to stop the foolishness that was started under Mr. Morsi and these crazy Islamists that were actually supported by our crazy government. Our current government is pro-Sunni Islam, period. And we have an Islamist in the White House right now and an Islamist supporting government officers and a bureaucracy. In fact, they've made statements, in fact, that they will accept Islamists, including especially those that are bisexual, into the country, even preference over regular Muslims. This is Obama's administration. It's just obscene. I mean, there's so many reasons to impeach this guy. It's like endless. It's endless.
I know.
What I'm amazed at is that the Republicans, you can't wait, guys, for the 2014 elections that are going to happen in November. He's blowing the country apart. He's literally taking a wrecking ball to it. And now they got this crisis, and you see the picture on Drudge. It shows all people coming up on the death train from Central America,
exactly.
San Salvador and Nicaragua, coming up through Mexico to America to dump all our kids here. It's like, are you crazy? Well, we'll send food down. We'll help you. We'll even build shelters. For God's sake, don't do that. Keep them in your families. Go out and live in your villages and so on. We'll help you. But the idea that they're going to dump their kids here, that's so crazy. And these kids
I think there's going to be a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for these children. It's actually not going to happen.
Well, they only have $5,000 a month, so obviously there were specific rumors started by the Obama administration and by its actions dumping 70,000 plus convicted felons who should have been deported rather than kept in the country onto the streets by Obama, and everybody said, hey, the message is, don't worry if you're illegally there, they're not going to kick you out, they're just going to let you go and continue to do felonies. I can't believe it. I mean, I'm beside myself thinking this. Same thing as the foolishness of what's going on with a very awful hospital system. I don't think they're fixing the problem at all. I like to see real action where there's monies that the doctors will have to actually build new hospitals, increase services, take people off of, there's 11 million people now that are on long-term rolls for, this is just in the Veterans Administration, that have been waiting for services. Many of these people are going to get their treatment posthumously. They're dead. I mean,
well, Doctor, I think you'll agree with me that most of what goes on in American hospitals, except for trauma, such as an automobile accident, cutting your hand with a chainsaw, is not what I would call proper medical treatment.
Well, what happens is there's a proper use of surgery and improper. There's also improper uses of drugs that they know are damn well toxic when they can choose non-toxic alternatives. They know there's lots of doctors doing improper testing when they don't need to do those testing and do alternative testing. They don't do the test to actually find the underlying problem of it because they want to keep people in the sick state because they have to maintain a corral like having so many animals in a pen to maintain their practice because it's depending on the number of people they've corralled to receive the insurance benefits from those people. It's a very scary, crazy system. And they don't want people to really get better. I mean, if you look at, for example, how they treat diabetics, the treatment of diabetics primarily speeds up the progression of their illness, doesn't fix the problem. The same way with hypertensives, same with dementias. We get people that are demented. We don't deal with their underlying problems of decreased brain circulation, decreased blood viscosity, increased blood viscosity.
Heavy metals in the brain.
Heavy metals in the brain. We want to detoxify, remyelination by giving the proper fatty acids to turn off the inflammation. No, none of those things are addressed. What they do is we want to stop sundowner syndrome, so we give them an antipsychotic so they really lose their marbles. And now they're completely spaced out, and they have bars on their mind rather than putting them in a barred room. I mean, it's almost like the scariness of 2 centuries ago in Britain. You'd go to a psychiatric facility and you'd see people kind of crawling the walls and kind of hooting and howling, and they were giving mercurials and other toxic mercury-based things to them, and a lot of them would have syphilitic Louis with brain gammas where their brain would be liquefying, and they'd be in states of all kinds of infection everywhere. Nobody had yet heard about Semmelweis, the Hungarian physician that realized between autopsies you should wash your hands before you do a delivery so the woman doesn't die of puerperal infections. It's just nuts. And I call these docs toxic docs. And when you talk to them, they even if they know you're qualified, they kind of pull back and they really don't want to hear. It's like, oh, I don't know. I had one doctor recently said to me, well, don't read the black box warnings. I said, are you nuts? Are you nuts? Why do you say that? They're on there because it's a medical legal requirement to read the black box warnings.
Right, exactly. And the doctor said he never reads them.
Well, he doesn't want the patients to read them. Even if they get access to a PDR.
To read them. No, heaven forbid.
No. Don't read those. You might actually can stop taking the meds, and then, my gosh, if you find an alternative way to deal with your problem, you might not become demented or sign an acceleration of your illness, and you might end up becoming no longer in the corral of potential patients that needs to be constantly cared until they terminate you and put you into what's called memory care, which, by the way, is the latest one of these euphemistic terms. They put you in memory care, and then they put you in hospice, and then they give you a bathtub of narcotics and expedite your demise and your suffocation to high-dose narcotics before you enter.
Well, let's back up. What is memory care? I've never heard that term before.
Memory care is what's in Obamacare. It's also one of the latest terms for hospice. What they do is memory care is where they try to make memory videos and pictures of you so they can remember. People can remember you as you're dying.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's another euphemistic way of kind of trying to make a news magazine of your demise by toxic polypharmacy, inadequate care, poor nutrition, and probably bed sores caused by improper care with lack of physical activity.
Well, that's where this, 95% of the American public is headed that direction, and people over age 50 are headed there really quick.
Well, they're headed there really quick because we have toxic food. Most of our meat is so toxic now. Now that we've got cesium-137 stalking us and strontium-90, etc., I tell people they need to move away from meat unless they get Atlantic fish, or they grow their own chickens to make sure the feed doesn't have arsenic in it. Most of the beef is going to be fed now GMO and toxic crap. And if you get any fish from the Pacific Ocean, you better make sure you have a radiation detector to make sure it's locally caught in the southern Atlantic, southern Pacific, so it's right off your coast. and it hasn't had time to accumulate cesium-137 in the North Pacific like in Alaska. I don't think people have
Doctor,
grass.
I can walk out of my neighbor's field, pick out the cow that I want to have the beef eat, and have that cow slaughtered.
Well, that's different. You see,
with no GMO and no, it's not natural.
You're in an enviable position where you can actually pick out the cow that's slaughtered. You know that cow is probably eating grass, which is going to have conjugated linoleic acid. It's good for your arteries. It's not fed grain because you don't want to feed grain to cows. Cows don't eat grain; they eat grass.
Grain.
Yeah, grass. Grass gives CLA, so conjugated linoleic acid, mobilizes fat out of your tissues. It raises your metabolic rate, helps to normalize your lipid levels, so you get no VLDL cholesterol. You have normal HDL cholesterol. You don't end up with dead monocytes called foam cells forming plaque in your artery walls. We know exactly what causes heart disease. It's a formula for disaster, and it goes right up from our drug companies and our pharmacies. You know. They're farming us, actually. Pharmacies to the grocery stores with the toxic polypharmacy food, to the GMO food, to the aspartame-laced drinks, to all the other insanity. And then people wonder why their health goes kaputs. Well, they shouldn't be surprised. You know, if you go to a country like a third world country like Nicaragua or Guatemala, this stuff doesn't exist. You have a chicken. The chickens are pecking around the yard and eating insects and everything. It's got proper biological molecules in it. You kill the chicken, tastes like chicken. It doesn't kill you, make you sick. As long as the chicken's freshly killed and properly cut up and properly refrigerated, you're not going to die of some infection. Same with fish. Southern Hemisphere, you're not going to get exposed to Fukushima Daiichi. They're not fixing the problem because they want to destroy the biology of the North Americans and Europeans and people in the Northern Hemisphere. The globalists
and they're being quite successful at it.
Well, the fact that they're not doing my book, by the way, is just about great. It'll be out this week now, before the 4th of July, and it'll be on Blu-ray. It'll be on DVD, so you'll be able to actually get a disc from us. Pull up the PDF document. If you want this book on Fukushima, it's pretty shocking. It's huge. It's got all the emails going back 3 years with Chris Harris, our nuclear expert, and my plans for dealing with every aspect of including our nutraceutical protocols. There is a technical solution, but the problem is it's not a matter that it's not that it can't be done, it's that they don't want to do it. The same as these doctors. I
look forward to reading it, Doctor. This is the Liberty Man signing off.
Thank you, John. Thank you for preps. And we'll be back tomorrow. We're going to have an amazing special coming up on Wednesday with Keith Davies on Islam and what's going on in the Middle East.